So you've worked hard for a number of years and you finally managed to acquire that piece of land. Might be an eighth, might be a quarter, might be an acre, might be more, but you are very proud of it and you want to construct a house, a home, a building. Where do you begin? Which professionals do you engage and why? And what are some of the alternative technologies that can be used in construction to make it more affordable? And buy or build, which is it, the pros and cons? Any questions you have today, it is Construction 101 here on Business Now. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Here are the highlights. On the show today, what must you know before beginning your construction journey? Also, which laws guide the construction sector and why are they important? And what new technology is making construction affordable for Kenyans? All right, and we'll be getting into our news of the day before we begin, but here's a quick look at my guests this afternoon. On the show this afternoon, we're speaking to a number of professionals. David Nahinga is a quantity surveyor and he's of Ujenzi Boran. We're talking to us about how to get started. All those horror stories you've heard, David will probably give you some tips on that. Emma Miloyo, architect from Design Source. She's the co-author of Building in Kenya and is also the former president of the Architectural Association of Kenya and the first female president of the Architectural Association of Kenya, I should say. She'll be here on the show with us, including Engineer Maurice Akech, who is Executive Director of the National Construction Authority and the Registrar of Contractors. He's also here on the show with us. Any questions you have, please start tweeting them. We'll be happy to have them here to my guests. The hashtag is Business Now at Citizen TV Kenya, at Yvonne Okwara. Please do send in your questions and we'll definitely get them in to our guests. But first, let's take a quick look now at some of the stories making headlines on the show this afternoon. Now, a week after ordering an inquiry into the deteriorating value of Kenyan tea at the weekly auction, Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya has been engaging stakeholders on the same. The CS is currently holding a meeting with the independent tea producers to discuss interventions on tea prices and their role in the tea industry reforms. The ministry says the cost of producing a kilo of tea is roughly 108.83, but it is now fetching 167 kilos at the auction. And Kenyans living in the diaspora can further tap into investment opportunities back home. This was revealed during a session held by Cooperative Bank on investment opportunities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Kenya's ambassador to Thailand, Lindsay Kiptines, chaired the webinar. And finally, the UK has retained Kenya in its list of countries whose nationals are barred from entering Britain. This follows concerns of a spread of new COVID-19 variants in the European nation. The move marks a blow to Kenya's efforts to reviving its travel and tourism industry. All right, so it's time for our conversation this afternoon. The hashtag is Business Now. Once again, you can send in your questions at Citizen TV Kenya and at Yvonne Okwara. Where to begin with your construction? It is Building 101 on the show this afternoon, and I am so pleased to have with me Engineer Maurice Akech, who's on my extreme left, David Nahinga and Emma Miloyo. Thank you, lady, gentlemen, for joining us on the show. Engineer, I think I'll begin with you. So you want to build, you want to construct, whatever size it is. It could be a one-roomed unit or 10 bedrooms or whatever it is. Let's begin first with the key regulations and laws. Many people would wonder, but I'm doing what I need to do. So, on my little piece of land, what are some of the key laws and regulations that guide the process to begin with?
Thank you, Yvonne, and also I want to appreciate the panelists and Jambo Kenyans. This is a good opportunity for us to know where we need to begin, because you realize that construction is something that we have on our activities daily, just like food, because this is the only continuous thing we keep doing on a daily basis. You may need a car every day, you may not need other things every day, but you need a house to sleep on at the end of the day when you're through with your duties of the day. So construction is a very broad area of discussion, and it is guided by so many laws in our country. And all these laws are all working together to be able to help us as wananchi end up with a house or a product that is of good quality, is safe and habitable to live on. So starting with the National Construction Authority, which is an act of parliament established in 2011 with the sole mandate of overseeing and coordinating the development in the construction industry. This is where all the other activities end or terminate as far as construction approvals are concerned, by way of registering a project, which is a product geared towards coming up with a constructed item, like a house, a road, a dam, or whichever item you think of in terms of construction. So at NCA, we do the regulatory aspect as far as construction is concerned, but we have many other laws. Like, for instance, you've indicated that somebody already has a title, a title deed, that now they own a piece of land which they want to maybe construct a house or something. Where do they begin? The first thing is that I know they must look for somebody who will interpret their dreams into an actual product in form of paper. So this is an architect. Okay. And having gotten an architect, the architect will design as per the dream of the client. Now this time I'm calling the title holder as the client, or the developer in that regard, or the employer who eventually will employ all these teams that I'm talking about. Once the architect has conceived the dream and prepared it into a concept, and then it becomes something that you can now see in terms of diagram or a line work. You say, okay, this is where my plot is, my house will fit into this space, and because of the number of bedrooms I need, and whatever companies in like the kitchen and sitting room, this is how it will sit. If it's not big enough, maybe you think of a vertical space. How do you put others up there? How do you come into that particular facility? How is it oriented in terms of other spaces around it? I'm sure Emma here will talk more about that, because she's an expert in architectural services. Then from there, because you are doing it alongside other activities within that space, within how you come in. So there's an aspect of planning. So there is need to have this particular drawing taken for approval at the county level, the county where you're doing that development. So this is now guided by the Physical Land Use and Planning Act. We refer to it as PLUPA nowadays. So PLUPA, which is an act that was established in 2019. It repealed the previous Physical Planning Act, so the PPA. So this particular drawing is taken to the county will look at it, and is the architect that's actually helping you to submit it at that stage. Now, in some counties, the architectural drawings will be taken, then followed by the structural drawing. In some counties, they'll be required to go together. Now, which means I've introduced another term here, the structural drawing. Where does it come from? Of course, from the architectural drawing, which you have agreed with the client, requires to be supported. Architectural drawing is about space, beauty, and aesthetics, and orientation and how the space looks like. But it needs to stand. It needs to be safe. It needs to be structurally strong. The person to take care of this is this person called the structural engineer. Now, the structural engineer is a trained civil engineer whose main role is basically to ensure that the issues of foundations, how deep you dig, how big the foundation is, depending on the size of your building, and how tall it will be, will take care of all that. They have been trained as an engineering scientist to look at all parameters that will make you sure that your house is safe, strong, and durable, and structurally sound. Now, some counties require that you submit all that together. Some counties you have, like for Nairobi County, you have to submit the architectural drawings. They must get physical planning approval. Then from there, you submit the structural drawings, which are prepared on the basis of architectural drawings. After that, there is another very important person having secured the approvals, either before or after. This is not time-bound. It's not a finish to start activity. You can look for a quantity surveyor to be able to now extract information from these drawings, the architectural drawing and structural drawing, to be able to prepare what we call bill of quantities. and schedule of materials, which will tell you, for this particular size of house or building, these are the number of items you will need. And this is the quantity. And this is the guiding price. Now, this particular document is very important because this is what will guide in terms of your cost and other parameters to ensure that what you have in your pocket for purpose of developing that particular facility is adequate. Because you may be so ambitious that you have some amount of money you think will be able to do you a certain product, but it's not enough. So this is what guides. And from there now, it is very important that you look for, this is the person called the implementer, the contractor.
Yeah.
Remember, you can end up doing all these things, but they just end on paper. A nice piece of paper with very beautiful, what we call, they call them, the architects produce what we call
renders.
The renders, yeah. Very beautiful, but it's on paper. So to convert it from that particular render or that pictorial diagram into a real product, you need a contractor. Now, the owner of this project or particular drawing will have to look for a contractor who has to be licensed by NCA. Now, this is where NCA comes in.
Okay.
That contractor must be licensed, must be having a valid practicing license for the particular scope of the project to be done. If it's a building project, then they need to have a license for building works. And depending on the size of the project, if it's so big that is a billion plus, then they have to look for a bigger category contractor, because we also categorize our contractors based on their size, in terms of capacity.
So in terms of experience
exactly.
with the type of projects that they've worked on.
So if you're doing a big project and you're looking for a small contractor, I mean, again, that may not count for you. He has a license, yes, but it's not able to do what you're expecting to do.
Okay.
Then you have to sign a contract between this contractor and the developer. Now, at this point, when you bring all these things to National Construction Authority, because the National Construction Authority will be looking at what we call quality assurance along the process. Has the drawing been approved? Do you have a registered architect who has developed those designs or drawings? Do you have a structural engineer who is also qualified and registered by the relevant regulatory body? In this case, Engineers Board of Kenya. For the architect, this is the Board of Registration of Quantity Surveyors and Architects and Quantity Surveyors. Yeah. And also, have you developed a bill of quantities by a registered quantity surveyor? All these documents are brought. But there's an aspect I left behind intentionally because I wanted to bring it at the point of registration at NCA, which is a license, an environmental license, which is normally prepared or given by NEMA. That is a National Environmental Management Authority under the Environmental Act. Yeah. These are all now what ensures that whatever you're going to put together meets the requirement as far as your drawings and designs are concerned. So what does NCA do when they receive all this documentation? Yeah. They ensure that the approved drawing is there, the NEMA license is there, and any other license that may be necessary based on the project type and scope. And then they are put on the system, but whose responsibility is to apply for this for registration is the responsibility of the developer. Even though they may use an agent, they may say, architect, push this for me. Right. They may say, contractor, do this for me. But at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with the developer, that they have secured all the necessary approvals to be able to submit those documentation for registration by NCA. And all these are from the comfort of where you sit. You don't have to visit NCA offices. You can do it as long as you have a device with internet and you have all these documents scanned. You just need to push it through the system. It will come to our side. Then we'll start evaluating to see whether everything is there, including due diligence, because you may say that all these things are valid and genuine, and yet they're not. So we have a way of carrying out due diligence to check the authenticity of all these documents. Then the other thing that is very important for Mwananchi to know, the moment you submit an architect license, the architect will get an auto-generated notification on their end that you've been selected for this project. Are you aware about it? If they say yes, good enough, we proceed. The engineer will also receive a similar mail from their end telling them about the project and the client. If they say yes, we proceed. Then the quantity survey as well. The contractor again also will receive. What is important is that all these people you are submitting their licenses must also be in their databases of various registration bodies, be practicing professionals. Because if they are not, then we will not find them in the list because we have integrated. Okay. You cannot pull out any name from anywhere.
I see.
Yes.
And quite an elaborate one. And we'll also talk about then, because this is at the start.
Yes.
So you get the approval from NCA, and then you break ground and you begin. Okay. And this is the procedure required for every piece, every construction project.
Every project,
So
regardless of the amount,
whether you're
regardless
in
of the scope.
Syokimau,
Yes,
whether
yes.
you're in Kakamega, whether
Yes.
you're in Kilifi or in Meru, this is the procedure.
These are national regulations, yes. So it cuts across the country.
Whether it is a one-room unit, a one-bedroom house, or 15 bedrooms.
Every project has its own risks. What we are trying to mitigate are those risks, whether it's a small house or a big house. Because at the end of the day, it will have a life inside and must be protected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
David, does everybody do this? You're a quantity surveyor, and you've been mentioned, and I'm glad when you mentioned, a few of those people. Well, we don't have a contractor here, but at least we've got, you're all partly a contractor, but at least we've gotten, most of them here. We don't have a structural engineer, but listen.
Well, he's a structural engineer.
You're a structural engineer. Okay, so good. We're in good company. We could actually construct a house right here,
Yes.
right now, right?
Only I love to wear two hats. But it's
That's
okay.
all right. I hope your licenses are up to date. But David, does everybody do this?
Now, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel with the fellow guests, and I think it's an important conversation.
Yeah.
But I want to look at it from the man on the ground, because you see, if you look at the quantum of all the laws that are there in the country, there is no one individual person who knows all those laws. So what is a person supposed to do if they cannot memorize, or they cannot memorize all these laws that engineer has said? So for me, I look at it as a series of challenges, because that's what life is. And I've tried to reduce it to about 5 challenges, because if you have a decision you want to build, you will definitely have a vision challenge. Why do you want to build? What is the goal you want to achieve? Okay, there are various reasons for building. One, it could be to move from one financial position to another. For example, if you're building to sell, you simply want to get the job done and then you offload it,
Right.
which means you are keen on the input costs, which means all these fees, the professional charges, the cost of land, the cost of construction, and then what can the market afford to pay you after going through all this. So that's why you need to have a reason, a vision. If it is a house you're going to occupy, then you will look at different metrics. What are you paying today for as rent?
Yeah.
And when will be the payback period? At what point will you have gotten back the money that you put in? So before you even come into the drawings, you must address that vision challenge. Because now if you do not address that vision challenge, the danger is you will overbuild. Because if you go to the architect,
Overbuild.
the engineer, yes, you will overbuild. You might actually, the architect is a creative person.
Right.
And if you are tickling their creativity, they will design for you anything. Basically, they are creative people. So, for example, even things you cannot afford.
Yeah.
But if you have a vision and you say you want to move from this financial position to another position within this period, then you can address when you're with the architect, then the architect will advise you accordingly and say, okay, the quantity surveyor says if we use this type of roofing, we will overshoot your budget.
Okay.
So there are 2 costs. There is the cost of building and there is the cost of selling. The difference between that will be what you realize. And if you're going to live in that house, then you look at, does it make economic sense to continue renting or to actually build and move into that house?
Okay.
Okay, then, so that is just one challenge.
Right.
Then there is the design challenge, and that's where now you will approach the architect. What exactly do you want to build? Now, for you to understand this, you need to know the definition of a house. One, a house is enclosed space. At the definition, it's an enclosed space. And then secondly, a house is a collection of patterns. So when you take any house and you pull it apart, these patterns support the life of the people who use the house. For example, if they cook, then there is a kitchen.
Okay.
So the kitchen is a pattern. If the person likes exercises, then the gym becomes a pattern. So if you take apart any house, you would see this collection of patterns represent the user. So at the design stage, you need to have a catalog of your needs. What needs are you trying to achieve? Now, this will be very different from the vision challenge. Now, needs are advised by the users of those spaces. So if you have an elderly person, then the spaces must be accessible. If you have children, then you have to build friendly spaces for the children.
If you have persons with disability, then you have to consider them as well. Maybe putting up a maisonette, you know, and if you might have to think about that.
Yes, yes. And if there is a woman of the house, maybe she needs to write fiction. So you need to allow for those needs. Because if you consider the things we spend money on, housing is one of the most taxing, other than buying a car. So if you build blindly and you do not address your core needs as the user of those spaces. For example, if you build, many people build guest houses, guest wing, and they do not like guests. Maybe they get guests twice a year, maybe December and during Easter. Or it becomes a parking spot for relatives who are seeking jobs. It's not a bad thing to be African, but I'm saying your mathematics must make sense, because is it worthy to spend $500,000 to add an extra room for a visitor, or to overbuild the garage for the car? You see, many people end up getting it wrong, because first you didn't start with the user. For whom are you solving this problem of building? You know. So once you fix the design challenge, then you will have now the advice of the architect that within your budget, now there are constraints to all this.
Right.
There is the budget constraint, there is constraints imposed by the land. Like if your land is on a slope, or if your land has a running silt, you may not build in a certain way. And then you have your own aesthetic as a person. Right. You like houses with a thatched roof, or you want a roof of gold. You see, all these things.
Or Decra, or all these things that we
To
hear
dream
about.
is free, but then it has to be cut to size now based on the reality. How much land do you have? You see, if you pick a design online, for example, and you want to implement it, it might be too lengthy for the size of your plot. And that's why now, if you begin with the vision challenge and then your user needs, when you go to the architect now will be forced to think. Because most people abuse architects, so to speak, because they assume their work is just to draw. But they are there to help you think within the constraints that you're providing. Now, most people, when they come to me to build as a contractor, they say, I want to build with this technology. Now, that is the wrong way of beginning the conversation on building. Because if you begin with the technology, then the technology might surpass your budget. So where you begin is the user needs, and then after we've done the design, then we do the quantities. Now, we use the bill of quantity as a tool for thinking around the constraints that we set initially. So then we will say, this walling technology, now every building part, now a building, apart from it being a collection of spaces, it has things we call elements. These are parts of a building that can act independently of each other. Like the wall is an element, the window is an element, the door is an element, the roof is another element. So most people, when they want to build, they say, I want a roof like that of so and so. So you see, there are maybe 30 different design of roofs. But if you come insisting you want a certain roof or you want a certain material, then you lock the hands of the architect, because you've created a straitjacket. So what I'm saying is, if you look at it now, if you deconstruct the house and look at it as elements, now every element in a house has a substitute.
Okay.
So if it is a roof, there is corrugated roof, there is the stone-coated roof, there is... So if you begin from first principles, we can go on every part of the house and select the option that first addresses your aesthetic, creates the enclosure, and meets your budget and the goal. Because if you overbuild, then nobody would rent or nobody would buy. Right. That's why we do not have, technically, we do not have, for example, like a serious shortage of housing per se. We have houses that were not built for the users that are existing.
So they're not fit for purpose.
They are not fit for purpose.
Okay, and you've given us some very sobering realities there about cutting our cloth according to our cost. But and you've mentioned some important things, Emma. do people come to you and say, I want like that one? I want like that house. In fact, there's people who say, why would I need an architect? I can easily go on the internet, by the way, and
Pinterest.
Google. Yes,
Google is
oh
your
my
friend.
gosh, yes. That's me on Pinterest every day, just looking at all of these, my dream home, whatever that would be. And you can get a plan, you know, and a house that's drawn up.
Yeah.
Why would I come to you? And just like David said, maybe some people come to you without that need. Is that a challenge that you experience? I want a nice big house. Yes. So what do you want? Make it nice and big. I want 4 bedrooms. And what are the challenges, and why is it important to have an architect?
And thanks, David, for just asking the question of why are you building? So why, what, the 3 W's, why, where, when, and how, and also to engineer for spelling out the statutory regulations around buildings, and just. Like I said, I'm a co-author of a book, and I think what David was saying, that a lot of people don't have access to this information. And as an architect, I saw that need, that people do not know where to go, or how do I cram all those things? Unless I'm in the system, there's no way I'll know where I'm supposed to go. And sometimes your piece of land you've bought might be on a flight path, or you needed to have gone to Kenya Civil Aviation. You live next to DOD. You need to have gone to the Department of Defense. So it's quite a quagmire to build. Yes, yet it's such an important need, and I think COVID has brought that to the fore. That sentimentality, before people were questioning, but when people had to live in their, stay in their houses for hours upon hours without going out, we all just realized the importance of those 4 walls around everybody. And yes, we have challenges as architects when people come to us and they do not have what David has so well articulated. Why am I building? Am I building for long-term investment, as something that I'm going to put in and I know within 10 or 15 years, it's going to start paying me back. That's a different rationale. If I'm building for brand, famous our politicians sometimes, before you run, you launch a political career somewhere back there, you have to have your big mansion that you will not stay in, maybe once in 5 years. But are you doing it for brand? Because if you're doing for brand, then the question of cost is a totally different thing. Am I doing it for shelter? Am I looking for a peace of mind and maybe a sentimental attachment that I need a roof over my head and I don't need to worry about this? Which, again, with COVID, people just then realize that there's a certain value in not having to think about the roof over your head when things became so destabilized. So when you have that very clear and you come to me, that becomes much simpler. Why an architect? Why the professionals? People think professionals are expensive. There's that misunderstood,
I mean, a structural engineer, a quantity surveyor, contractor, an architect.
All of them with their markups and the like.
And then licensing, and then I have to go here.
And I could have gone to Njoro there and shown him, kama ile,
nifanyie hapa. But
why
then
am
what
I
you
going?
do, just make it smaller. Hiyo sitemu yake ni kubwa, sisi tuko watatu. Pale mimi kuna bedroom 5, I don't need 5, I just need 3.
Na chuma ni kama ile. Tumia hiyo, niambie ninunue kwa hardware gani.
Make it smaller, make it bigger. Huku extend huku. My piece of land is rectangular, his is square,
Yeah, and then it ends up being a mess. And sometimes you see the mess in the built environment, because like David said, it's not a cheap investment at all. Even that, some of the houses we see and we're like, what monstrosity is it? It's a lot of money. And we always, when you're going for brain surgery, do you go and say,
nisaidie kama vile
exactly.
Alikuwa na shida, sama alikuwa na headache, just fix me.
It's the same rationale. This is for many people, it's your life savings you're putting in. Put them in the right hands, because professionals can actually save you money. So sometimes you will do the wrong thing thinking you're cutting corners, but those corners end up costing you. Architects, as much as we come at a fee, quantity surveyors, we can actually help you to value engineer your drawings, your BQ, to ensure that what we're saying, fit for purpose. I have this much, I have 1,000 shillings, therefore I need a coat of this size. We can change this. We don't have to have silk. We can have cotton, and I'll still be able to.
On that, why an architect? What is it you do for me? Like I said, I can get a drawing anywhere.
So I walk you, first of all, vision matching. What's on the internet may not be fit for you. So understanding you as a person and your needs, putting that on paper, visualizing something. Yes, it's great to have a mood board. We call them mood boards. Like, this is my kind of language that I want and the kind of building I want. But also managing all these other processes. Like, it's really a minefield sometimes, and you need a professional to be able to tell you, this is the kind of license you needed, this is the kind of professional you needed to help you save money, and to walk you through and manage the contractor to give you a product as the architect had imagined it. Yeah,
and
so managing that whole, and you had you dreamt, and managing that whole process, because it's not always easy when you don't have the information.
Right.
It's very easy for people to also take advantage of you. So really, the architects and the professionals are your team, making sure that, in a sense, that you're well equipped, because people can actually take advantage of you, whether it's cost. I'm telling you, construction is not for the faint-hearted, and I think we'll be coming to that question of buy or build. It's not for the faint-hearted. Don't go into it blindly, and hence equip yourself. Google is your friend, books are your friend. Equip yourself with the knowledge, because it's not plug and play. There's a lot of processes in there. Have someone walk you through that process and hold your hand through that process, and even managing until the end. It's really very important.
Okay, all right. And you've talked about information. We'll be coming back, and there's clearly quite a bit of feedback on the same. So we'll come back and talk about that. I'm seeing your questions here coming in on Twitter. Remember, the hashtag is Business Now. I'm seeing one on perhaps harmonizing the application and approval process from Kibunja Vatris. We'll be getting into that. And someone else saying this process is too lengthy for villagers to construct decent houses, says Abraham Ngondo on Twitter. We'll be talking about why these processes and approvals are important. So is it just ticking a box and saying, yes, got this, yes, got that? We'll be asking about why this is important. We have indeed seen some serious catastrophes in this country when it comes to construction. So we're talking about why. Keep your questions coming in. The hashtag is Business Now. Where do you find the information? Both Emma and David will also be telling us a little bit about where you can get that in a book, on a website. Where is that info? Hashtag Business Now. We're back in a moment. This is Building 101 on Business Now. All right, and I literally had to just keep my guests quiet because the conversation was happening, during the break, and so fascinating to learn, what it takes to get one structure up and ready. I want to get into your questions just a little bit, but there was something we were saying during the break that I think is very important for us to, to have on the show for our viewers to also benefit from what we're discussing. So. Why the approvals are necessary. Emma, you were saying something about even structures that we don't think require or might be low risk. What was that? Just tell us what you were saying about, boundary walls that you put, around your boma and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and this is from NMS, Nairobi Metropolitan Services, said that more people are killed from collapsed boundary walls than from collapsed buildings. So when the collapsed buildings collapse, it makes news and we hear about it. But actually, a lot of boundary walls that have not been built properly and structurally fall on, whether it's children on playground, whether it's on people, in a setup. I mean, we've seen that all around when they fall on cars, sometimes overnight. But actually, many times there are fatalities out of that, and those fatalities are more than those on an annual basis, more than the deaths from collapsed buildings. So it may look low risk, but actually their lives lost.
And even for that, you require, some level of approval and some level of, professionals behind it, because this is important. Okay, and that is an interesting statistic, that just gives us food for thought. I want to take a look at some of the questions that are coming in for this one so that we can just try and answer as much as possible. Kibunja Vatris on Twitter asks, county governments are asking for approvals. NCA is asking for the same. Public health demands approvals. Why can't they harmonize the application for approval processes and save Kenyans from these high financial requirements? Engineer, I think this one would be for you.
Thank you for that question, Yvonne, from Kibunja. In fact, as I address it, let me first of all demystify the issue of low risk.
Yeah.
There's the difference between a connection between the risk and the impact. So it is not about low cost that means low risk. It could be a low cost item in terms of the project or structure, but the impact should it collapse is much higher. Like look at, for instance, where there is supposed to be likely incidents of crowding. If such a structure was to collapse, even if it's a simple and low cost structure, and it will definitely affect more people in terms of loss of lives, then what are you talking about? That's a very high risk structure, even though the cost is low, and even the way you look at it is simple. So we look at the impact of what would occur if that particular item or structure is going to collapse. So that will be informed by the professional. That's why it's good to engage one, so that they mitigate all that at the beginning, rather than waiting until the end. Yeah, so it's important to understand that. Now, the aspect of multi-phased approach in terms of approvals is well-meaning. The fact that everyone, or every institution, or every agency, every actually aspect, or every agency has an aspect to deal with, which they are unique and they are empowered by various pieces of legislation. Because we cannot all be professionals. We cannot all be, what's the word?
Experts.
Experts.
Yes.
Yeah, so we actually do our own thing. The only question is, how do we harmonize or streamline to ensure that the process is smoother?
Right.
Maybe handover a period is much shorter, so that it's like a button. You don't have to wait until I arrive for you to start running.
Right.
You start running
linear.
As you wait for...
as I bring the button.
Right.
And you can even do it like in one house, like a clearing house kind of a thing. So right now, to be able to mitigate that, I think the government has started moving towards a multi-agency approach, where we are working, like for instance, when one institution receives approval, except the first stage, which is planning, which has to be concluded, because if it can't happen, it can't happen.
Yeah.
So you have to wait until it's confirmed it can happen in that space, the way you have designed it.
The rest.
Before. So, but beyond there now, there is this coordinated approach. Like, for instance, I can let you know that when NEMA receives requests for approvals based on their environmental impact assessment, they share those reports with us in advance. So by the time the developer is coming already, that information is with us. But even as we move more online, all of us are moving towards online. Now, this will even inform how fast it will be in terms of seamless handover. So this headache will be, I think, over the past, because the issue is just the period taken. And even the ease of doing business, clarion call, which is currently the Kenya government is working on, is going to cut off all this period and duration, so that in terms of submission to approval, it takes a very short time. At NCA, because of the ease of doing business, right now we're only taking a day to approve low-cost projects in terms of when we receive them for project compliance. And it is important to confirm to Kenyans that at NCA, we do not do what we call project approval. We actually issue a compliance certificate, meaning that all those things we are supposed to follow, all those steps have been followed correctly, procedurally, and NCA guarantees that everything is in order. That is the purpose of it. That's why it's called oversighting and coordination. And then from there, we go to site again and carry out what we call quality assurance inspections to ensure that everything else is going on well.
Because I wanted to ask, once you give the compliance certificate, does NCA's job end there, that we've approved everything and we say you're good to go and you begin construction, and will we never hear or see NCA again?
That's when sometimes you come across the famous red X, which is always out there.
Right.
Though it is reducing because of this, whatever you're doing, and we really appreciate this opportunity, because the more of this we do, the lesser the red X's you will see out there. Because sometimes it happens because they're not aware.
Yeah.
You know, they are less informed.
Right.
But with more information, now those red X's will disappear, because it means there's something that is not compliant within that project when we visit. So upon issuing the compliance certificate, we have officers across the country. By the way, we have offices in every part of this country that ensures that every construction that is going on is compliant with all the approvals that we have given in terms of compliance certificate. But before we leave this space of the requirements, because I think we need to tell Kenyans that as the architect is very key, if it's a building project, the engineer is very key, the structural engineer. The quantity survey is very key in terms of cost control and all that. And the contractor is very key in terms of implementation. Yeah. But even as we sit here, if we didn't have lights, for instance, there's no energy to put on. So that light needs another expert that will help you determine that in terms of how bright or dim that space. It's called illumination, you know. So the electrical engineer will be able to help you in that regard. And then, you know, when we sit here, maybe the room is closed and there are no windows. There is also still air being extracted out and fresh air being brought in. What does that mean? You need a mechanical engineer. And even, so there is all these people that are needed to be able to ensure that a project is complete. But all these people I've mentioned will be key in terms of preparing plans, specifying, giving specifications, and giving you documents. But who takes it from there to an actual product is the contractor. But contractor is a businessman.
Yeah.
There is this person called the construction worker. Now, the one who makes sure that their hands are made dirty to give you the product you need.
Right.
So that fund is very important as we discuss these matters here. And if he's not qualified, you can have a very beautiful drawing, very beautiful specifications, but workmanship turns out to be very poor. So it's good to recognize that all these are players in this, and let's not forget about the supplier will give you the materials, the manufacturer will manufacture, and so on and so forth. So it's a very space that is a very long value chain. That needs a lot of collaboration.
And I want to ask David, but all of these people, is there a one-stop shop where I can go and say, David or Emma or engineer, look, this is my dream, this is what I want, and then you find all these people? Because I mean, I want to build a house, but I really do not have the knowledge or the time to find somebody who's going to take a look at the air quality, the electrical engineering, the structural engineering. Is there a one-stop shop? Like, can I come to you and then you find all these people?
So, good question. So, I want to say one thing about regulation, and then to answer the question. So, let's call all this regulation bureaucracy. I want to speak a positive word about bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is good. So it is cheaper to actually comply. Bureaucracy is good, and I will emphasize why it is good. It is good for things that touch on the life of people. So, for example, if children were being born and they were not getting registered, so let's assume we mute the registrar of persons. You see, that means that children can disappear, and nobody would know. They will not be missing persons. They would not be refugees. They would not be. It will be as if they were born in the dark and they disappeared in the dark. So bureaucracy is good because that database is important in terms of mitigating any challenges that might arise. Now, but we must also be cognizant of the fact that people have a need, and when people have a need, people get what they want.
Now, they get it done, regardless of regulations, laws.
Now we have this other thing called self-authored architecture. Now the professions, our profession, there's a problem with the way the structure of our profession is. So we are in the same school of design. The architects there, the engineers, the quantity surveyors, the land economists, and the landscape people. Now all these people, because we are all producing one product, a home or a space, but we are in these silos. And so there's a club for architects, which has a president. There's another club for quantity surveyors. There's another club for valuers. Now there is no, from a man on the street, there is no one-stop shop because all these people are important. Because if you are living in a house, you need plumbing because to manage the waste, to get the waste out and the air in and all that. So now I have sat with this problem for some time, and I think there are basically 4 ways. There are 4 ways a man on the street can build their house. And then I'll address where will be the starting point. So there's the way we are taught in school, and there is the actuality, what really happens in the ground. So the thing is this: there are 4 ways. If you're looking to buy a cooker for a cooker or a chair, you don't go, or a car, you don't go to the showroom and start saying, I think I need 4 burners. Can we add a 5th burner? Or I think it should have 3 legs. You do not bring that information. If you go to the artist on the street and you tell them to draw you, you don't tell them how to hold the pencil. You don't specify that. You don't say, you take it that they know you have 2 eyes and they'll draw you with the 2 eyes, isn't it? So that said, it means there is a definite, now building is an exact science. So building is an exact science, meaning that you can quantify space. You can quantify the length of a wall and multiply by the rate. you can quantify the surface area of a roof and multiply by the cost per square meter. So it's very easy to know what a house will cost. Now, if we know building is an exact science, even design, there's a level of design where it is an exact science. And I'll use this example so that people can understand. If you're given 4 chairs and you're told to arrange them, you can know the number of ways you can arrange those chairs. Either you start with the blue, then the red, then the green, or you start with the red, or you arrange them 2-2, or you arrange them in a row. But there's a definite mathematical number of ways of arranging those pieces. So I want people to look at a house as these things that you can have a definite number of designs. And I'll come to the 4 ways, but I'm giving this background information so that we get it right. So if you want to build a kitchen, a bedroom, and a sitting room, and a bathroom, those are 4 spaces.
Right.
If you put 100 architects in a room, they will have a limit as to how many ways they can arrange those rooms. Which means, if you create a database of designs, many people will cluster, according to the bell curve, around a certain design.
Are you just putting them out of work?
Which means, I'm saying it's a mathematical problem. So we use math. Math is a way of thinking.
Okay. All right.
So it means if we designed 50 one-bedroom houses and 50 two-bedroom houses for Western Kenya, for Samburu, for the coastal region, and a lay person walked into such a space, let's call it a library of architecture and design, they can be able to actually pick a design that agrees with their spirit, with them. And then the only thing that needs to be done is say, oh, I need larger windows. Let's add this. I think I need a place for the books. So let's go to the 4 ways. You can design from scratch. So you go to the architect, and then you say what
we have
I dreamt of a balcony and I
Yes.
saw something. So the architect will translate that as an artist into a design. So that is option number 1, and it's the most expensive option, because then you have to pay the full fees. They are translating your dream into paper, which will be quantified. So design from scratch. Then option number 2 is adopt a design. Architect Emma here has designed houses that the client didn't like. And they are in the computer. It is intellectual property. It is still her intellectual property. What is necessary is for us to have an open conversation and say, you guys, why don't we help people? Why can this architecture serve people? Because right now, the 1% of the population who have the money, all the architects are looking forward to design for those ones. What about these 99%? So these 99% are doing what I'm calling self-authored architecture. They're simply deciding and building. So option number 2 is adopt a design. Option number 3 is adopt a design with modification. Meaning the staircase is this side, bring it this side. I don't like the roof, change the color, change the sink where it is and stuff. Then option number 4 is adopt from a foreign design. What you said, on Pinterest, you've been collecting these designs. You like the entrance transition of that house in Atlanta. You like the kitchen of that house in Ghana. So we bring it together, and then you have a solution.
So those are some of the options that are available. The one thing I wanted to ask you about is very quickly, there was a question here, and I think I'd read it before. Abraham, who said, here it is, Abraham Ngondo, who said, the process is too lengthy for villagers to construct decent houses. And you had talked about something that is in the NCA Act that enables people to find a way of doing this, but doing it in the right way and getting the necessary approvals. I just wondered if you can do that like in a minute, because we're running out of time.
In a minute, the NCA Act provides, and you can find this in the National Construction Authority Act 2011, Section 16. It says a person shall not be deemed to be a contractor if the work undertaken, 1, does not incur a cost exceeding such sum or sums as the board may from time to time determine, or 2, consists of a residential house for private use not requiring a structural design. And the rationale is our grandfathers who built before 2011, those houses are standing.
Hey, but even our mothers.
Surely. Even my father's house.
Why are you speaking about grandmothers? Our mothers are still alive and fathers.
So the NCA Act has done a good thing. They have these accredited persons. These accredited persons can build for you in their name. Now again, according to the Hammurabi Code, if an architect builds a house and it falls and kills the son of the builder, then the child of the builder has to be killed. So we're saying the Act allows us to have somebody on the ground who will have his skin on the game, on the line.
Correct, engineer? Are there alternatives?
Well, in terms of construction,
I'll come to you in a moment, yeah.
Depending on the value of the works and the risk levels.
Yeah.
So what is allowed for, and the board has allowed, is where, instead of looking for a contractor who is of a certain caliber, you can actually use an accredited site supervisor.
Okay.
And he must be there as part of that project. But you cannot do it without that skill. But that project must be to a certain limit where the risk levels are low. Of course, you cannot say the structural input is not there because everything is normal as structure.
Yeah.
The question is, the complexity is very low, and then is simple and simply understood. That can be done.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Site supervisor. So there's options, you know, that exist out there. But I like what you said about, you know, the bureaucracy is helpful for a reason, and I'll have you have the last word on that. But Emma, so what sort of alternatives are there? You know, we've talked about in terms of the skills, you know, the skill set of the professionals. Are there any emerging technologies and you know, approaches and designs that are there to make this more cost effective?
Yeah, and just I think we all remember something we were all excited about in the building industry when affordable housing became one of the big four agenda. We've not had too much about it now, but we're really, really excited because housing is a basic need. It's enshrined in the Constitution, and it's really, you know, when you look at Nairobi, and 60% of our residents live in less than dignified housing, without plumbing, without running water. It's really unfortunate. And I think the thoughts in terms of even just affordable housing coming in and having specific designs and typologies, those are thoughts that were there, and we continue to really speak to government, and government is partly represented here by Maurice. But just speaking to that, those ideas and saying, look, it's not a lost cause in terms of the kind of housing we put up. And in those type of scale of projects, it was very easy to also try a lot of these different, you know, technologies. Sometimes the technologies themselves in a one-unit house may not make sense. They make sense when it starts becoming mass housing. The ones you've talked about, the panels, you know, precast concrete panels. You've seen some of them with styrofoam and pouring concrete in.
Inside,
but really where it starts to make a lot of financial sense is when you're doing it on mass scale and where you're building modular. So, you know, you've got a certain size, you're going to put it here, and the same equipment, everything, you're also going to be able to roll out and replicate. So it's something that we really hope government doesn't lose sight of in terms of that agenda, and continues pushing towards it and trying to make it work, because housing is a basic need, has become more apparent even through COVID, and it's something that we shouldn't lose sight of. Maybe just also speak to, you know, what bureaucracy and everybody is talking about. I think there's been a lot of efforts, and from all the professionals and the like, we really, in terms of making it a one-stop shop. I mean, we've seen it happen with Huduma Center, we've seen it happen with the Citizen e-Citizen portal, where you go to one place and government is speaking at the back, in the back of house. They're speaking to each other. So it's something that's really possible, and we're looking forward to that innovation, and that we are known for as Kenyans coming to the building industry. But certainly, housing and building is very important. Buying is an alternative, again. Buying is an alternative.
Buying versus building?
Buying versus building is, and sometimes you have to judge yourself. You know, we have this mjengo bug as Kenyans. Everyone wants to, because so and so has done, I want to build like that. But sometimes you also have to look at yourself and your personality, and on what circumstances you are in. And sometimes buying may be a cheaper alternative. Do you have the time to oversee all this? And to speak to even what you said, sometimes you don't have to speak to all those people. Many times the architect will act as your agent, because they're the ones who will then connect you to all and sort of show you the way. But be informed. So even though you're going to an architect, have all your facts. Don't be putting everything into the hands of an architect. Have all your facts. But looking at your personality and where you are in life is very important, because building certainly comes with its perks. Perks, because it's you're custom building to what you like. Whether it's that color, whether it's that Pinterest thing that you saw. But buying, what you see is what you get. There will not be any shocks, because you won't have been promised heaven, and then you're shocked at what comes out. So what you're seeing, ready to move in, your keys are there. But also around, I think the biggest challenge around buying also is financial modeling. The biggest challenge around housing is the financial implications.
Absolutely.
And access to finance. So
Absolutely.
I think if we're able to break that, and again, there's Kenya, there are a few initiatives that have come into play to try and make housing affordable, because the cost of land and the cost of financing are the biggest factors. It's not even the building itself.
Yes.
Building is the same cost world over.
Right.
Cement may be the same cost, give or take, but land and the cost of financing. Those two are sorted,
All right.
then we'll have more people accessing housing.
I have 30 seconds, engineer. What happens if we don't get these approvals?
Well, three things can happen.
Yeah.
One, it means the quality is not guaranteed, so you are likely to lose your investment. Two, is that you have not followed the laws and procedures as the bureaucracy that we talked about, which is very important for managing complex projects. And housing is a very complex project. Even outside the government, the professionals themselves operate in a bureaucratic environment for them to guarantee that everyone has given their input. Then the third thing that can happen is that your building can end up being removed from where it is because it did not follow the requirements of the laws. Yeah. So ensure that you don't lose all this by the three things I've talked about.
And the worst would be that you know, people are injured or lose their lives. You know, I think, and that's really important. I want to thank you. I mean, clearly an hour is not enough to talk about everything we need to do in construction. And in case you're looking for information, there's Building in Kenya that's been co-authored by Emma Miloyo, who's my guest today. There's also Ujenzi Bora. The website is ub.co.ke and is quite active on Twitter and talks quite a lot about construction. And there's at NCA Kenya. They're also on Twitter as well. Like we said, get yourself informed, understand the process and the procedure. Hopefully we've helped enlighten you a little bit on what that is about. And you know what? Happy constructing, everybody, and happy building. Thank you very much for watching the show today, as always, and many thanks to my guests as well. This is Business Now. We'll be back here again next week on Monday, and you definitely want to tune in for that. The hashtag is Business Now. Keep the conversation going. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.